run for your life?
A certain hostility to the women was evident in a lot of Lennon's work around that time. Always had been. I mean, it was part of the more generalized rock and roll hostility that he felt. I mean, that's an example of the kind of progress, if you want to call it that we're talking about. That's really good rock and roll. It's not as raw as Money by any means. But without those surrendering much of that energy, at least in that case, because Lennon always wanted to generate that. Mm-hmm. But he also had all these verbal interests, you know. I mean, he really was a word man, much more than any of the other Beatles. That oughtn't be forgotten either. You know, here he was. One of the things that was happening to the Beatles is that this cute image was beginning to get him down. He wasn't leading a very cute life. It wasn't the way it looked in A Hard Day's Night and Help, you know. He wasn't a nice fellow all the time. And actually, the song I'd like to play next is also about that kind of hostility I was talking about, only it's intellectualized. It's a song about conversation. It's a song about being stoned, I think. It's a song about abortive romance. It's called She Said, She Said.
She Said, She Said. We're getting close now to the landmark album, I guess, Sgt. Pepper.
It's one of those landmarks that's more profitably seen from the distance, some people.
And what do you mean?
Well, that is to say, that's an unnecessarily skeptical thing to say. Among my colleagues, it's common to really put that album down. I would never put it down. I think every song on it is really good. Mm-hmm. But what I don't think is that it's the great work, the crowning work of genius of this ambitious bunch of lads from Liverpool. I don't think it's a crowning work of genius, that's all. I think it's a good, slightly sterile, a wonderful but slightly sterile album. It's also really the beginning of their dissolution. You know?
Yeah.
That's where the seams really begin to show. That's really, there's a lot of Paul McCartney on that record, actually. There's not a whole lot of John there, as would make sense, because it's a real studio. It's a real studio job, with all the rough edges smoothed off, and that wasn't ever John's way of doing things. The album that followed it, not counting Magical Mystery Tour, which was a collection of singles, was the Beatles, also known as the White Album. And on that album, the group completely breaks down. Some of those aren't Beatles songs. Those are John Lennon songs and Paul McCartney songs. And I don't mean to say that we didn't perceive that as a group identity and that I don't still think of it as a Beatle album, but you can also think of it in that other way. And it's very pastiche as well. It's a real attempt to experiment in a dozen different pop music styles. What you begin to see happening is that tendency between Paul, who really had a fondness for the cute, and John, who basically didn't like it, really begins to come out in that record. I mean, John had his own kind of cuteness, which was this Edward Lear nonsense whimsy, mm-hmm. Which you can hear on a Magical Mystery Tour, especially a cut I'd like to play next, which is really his great statement about himself in his Edward Lear phase. I am the walrus.